she found a finger in her bowl of chili at a Wendy's in San Jose, California.
He appears to be human, but he's not like any other human being I've ever seen.
First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
Is there any truth to all these stories that it's haunted?
Nothing at all. It's all a bunch of lies.
Are you Taylor? You didn't put the Taylor down!
We did this for the show.
We interrupt our program of dance music to bring you
Emily's second video on hoaxes.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies.
Before we get into it, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone that engages with this channel, leaves a nice comment, has donated on Ko-Fi. It means so much to me that you're enjoying what I'm doing. I can't believe there's over 10,000 of us now. So if you're not yet subscribed and you think, maybe I want to, then feel free. But if not, that is also fine. Sit back, relax, and let's get into tier 2 of the Hoaxes Iceberg.
Yeah! What is it good for?
The War of the Worlds is a novel written by H.G. Wells between 1895 and 1897, and it was first published in 1888 as a full novel. But we're not talking about the book, we're going to be talking about the infamous episode of the Mercury Theatre on the Air, which was an anthology of live radio dramas created by Orson Welles, no relation to H.G. Wells. It was broadcast on October 30th, 1938, and it gained infamy because the listeners thought it was real, or did they? Kind of like how we were talking about with the Blair Witch in the last video, the radio adaptation was designed to be believable and real. It was structured like a regular radio program that was occasionally interrupted with like news bulletins that detailed a UFO that had hit the ground in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. The play then progresses to news reporters on the scene finding aliens and the aliens eventually taking over.
Martian cylinders are crawling all over the country.
Then there's a break and the second part of the show begins, which is structured more like a traditional radio play. But a lot of people had only heard the first bit and they jumped to all manner of conclusions. It's important to note that over the years, the scale of just how many people thought the broadcast was real might have been exaggerated slightly. In fact, you could say the supposed panic over the War of the Worlds is a hoax in itself. There's a great article on slate.com that goes into a ton of detail on it, but essentially newspapers were getting overlooked in favour of radio for advertising, and so they leaped on any opportunity to sell the public on a story about how bloody terrible radio is.
Radio is new and we are learning about the effect it has on people. Learned a terrible lesson.
Do you think that this will cause the curbing of radio bulletins on the air today?
I simply can't imagine. It seems to me that the effects of this may cause much legislation. I simply don't know. It's the wisdom of radio executives and of an organized public will decide these things for us.
They totally exaggerated the number of people that had actually heard the broadcast. But because they kept reporting on it, people began to say that they'd actually heard it when they hadn't. And we know that because the C.E. Hooper ratings service telephoned 5,000 houses to ask them what they were listening to that night, and only 2% answered a radio play. So you've basically got a handful of people that were listening to a play on the radio that evening. There were so many rumours about people unaliving themselves, mass cardiac arrest, the phone lines all lighting up, people running through the streets, absolute pandemonium. But that's not really what happened. One thing that did happen is the FCC got radio stations to agree not to use fictional news flashes in their broadcasts, but that's really about it. I swear, this series is going to be me completely destroying all of these stories that we've come to think are real. Like, I genuinely thought that there was like mad hysteria over War of the Worlds, but yet again, it's just bloody media making stuff up, spreading their own brand of fake news. October 15th, 2009 was a relatively normal day. The band a-ha split up, Finland became the first country in the world to declare internet access a human right, and 6-year-old Falcon Heaney gained the nickname Balloon Boy.
What you all see right there is an experimental aircraft that inside of which is a 6-year-old boy who got into that aircraft not that long ago and accidentally launched it.
Richard and Mayumi Heaney were your typical couple, married with 3 children, and fan favourites on the TV show Wife Swap.
I'm making a spaceship egg.
I'm very particular about how my eggs, I got the little ship attacking the mothership, and then I just go in and boom, crash.
By all accounts, Richard Heaney is a colourful character. He's tried his hand at acting, stand-up, storm chasing, writing and UFO hunting. But it was his entrepreneurship that catapulted him and his family into the spotlight. He has invented tons of products, from the Bear Scratch, which is a wall-mounted back scratcher.
Hi, I'm inventor Richard Heaney. If you itch like a son of a twitch, then you need my latest invention, the patent-pending Bear Scratch.
To the Hing Duty truck transformer.
Hi, I'm inventor Richard Heaney, and boy do I love my truck! That's why I would never permanently mount toolboxes or a lumber rack on the back. No! I'm going to use my pickup to pick up hot chicks!
But his most famous invention was a balloon with the ability to hover above traffic, and his general goal was to get investors involved so that they could race them out in the desert. On October 15th, they did a test launch of the balloon, filling it up with helium in the backyard. And lucky for us, they filmed it.
Oh. Okay, hold on, Brad. Cut. Record.
Yeah.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Whoa!
Oh my God. Okay. Are you in? Taylor! You didn't put the Taylor down! What do you mean?
So let's just analyse what we've watched. The idea was that they would fill up this balloon, but it would still be tethered. But bloody Mayumi didn't put the tethers on. And I love that little kick he does at the end. It's kind of like the outdoors version of a fist through drywall. He is raging, and obviously it's all the woman's fault. To me, this is the fakest video in existence, and it is mad to me that people actually fell for it. But I will point out that both Richard and Mayumi proclaim their innocence to this day, but we will get onto that. So the balloon goes up, they look around, and Falcon is nowhere to be seen. They scramble around looking for him, and Falcon's brother Bradford tells his parents that Falcon is in the bloody balloon. Richard calls the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, hoping that someone would be able to track the balloon as it just sailed across the skies of Colorado. They tell him to call the police, which Mayumi does, and then Richard calls Channel 9 in Denver to see if their helicopter can track down the elusive balloon. The cops show up at the family house to search it, and the news begins to follow the oversized Jiffy Pop as it floats on the wind.
We believe if you look right now, you can get a perspective on the side of the balloon. It looks as if it is losing some of its ballast there, losing some helium. It may be seeping out, and that will, of course, cause that experimental aircraft to come down to Earth. The gravest concern is how to land this safely with a 6-year-old little boy inside.
Obviously frothing at the mouth at the opportunity of getting the horrific death of a 6-year-old captured on live television.
All right, it's going down now. I want to cut you off because it's actually going down. It's down to 300 and now 100 according to the helicopter. What we're going to do is, for our viewers, we're going to put this on a delay, and we're not going to show the moment of impact here.
Only when it landed, Falcon wasn't in it.
Tamara, I want to interrupt just because I just heard from Megan. Apparently KUSA, their photojournalist, is on the scene, is saying that there was nobody in this compartment, that the compartment is empty, which would explain then, I suppose, the way that they're handling this and trying to officially sort of verify that. And then that gets obviously to the a couple of questions. Did the boy fall out along the way, or is this part of some sort of hoax or some sort of effort at attention by the family that a lot of people are already suggesting is kind of a strange family to begin with? Let's listen to KUSA's coverage.
So people start worrying that he's fallen out, but in reality he was found hiding in a cardboard box in the rafters of the garage. CNN got the family to appear on their show that night, and the story begins to fall apart.
He's asking Falcon, did you hear us calling your name at any time? You did?
You did?
Why didn't you come out?
You guys said that We did this for the show.
Yeah.
No.
You didn't, come out?
No.
They were accused of making it all up, a charge that Richard wholeheartedly denies, but he did eventually plead guilty. When Mayumi was going through a polygraph test, she basically gave up the ghost and admitted that the balloon hoax was designed to get the attention of reality TV producers. Also important to note here is the reason why he pleads guilty. He said that Mayumi, his wife, was threatened with deportation, which sadly isn't surprising for the US justice system. Happens all the time. Richard was sentenced to 90 days in jail and Mayumi was sentenced to 20 days. So what really happened? Well, in an article published in October 2019 titled The Balloon Boy Hoax Solved, Robert Sanchez got to the bottom of the story. He managed to get access to the case file and inside he found handwritten notes from Mayumi, which basically break down the timeline of what happened. In April 2009, they're struggling to pitch this reality TV show and they keep getting rejected. Mayumi wrote, "What could we do to help them? They wouldn't put up the money, but we can do our own project. Then they could maybe make a one-off out of it." Then in October, things begin to heat up. They shoot some video footage of the kids, they build the flying saucer, and on October 6th, they get a video of Falcon saying, "I want to get inside it." On October 14th, Mayumi wrote that Falcon can hide in the closet with a safe in the basement. Then on October 15th, she wrote, "To my understanding, we're never going to launch the flying saucer because the strong wind changed our mind. Because of the wind, it might crash on somebody, cars or anything." Richard said we would do the third test and quit. That's why I thought he was acting so strange. After the flying saucer went off, he went so hysterical. Because he started so hysterical, I started taking it seriously. After it was launched, we did not know whether Falcon was in the flying saucer or in the house or anywhere. And finally, on October 18th, she wrote, "I found out when we visited our attorneys that Richard revealed he came down to the basement to look for Falcon, but he wasn't there. Richard thought really Falcon would be in the flying saucer." So basically, Falcon was supposed to be hiding in the basement where he and his dad would reunite after he'd alerted the news media. But Falcon decided to hide in the bloody garage instead, and his parents were genuinely like, "Where the hell is he?" So I think they probably would have had a moment of thinking like, "Oh my god, maybe he's in the balloon." Either way, the whole thing was just a desperate attempt to get a reality TV show. Totally normal world that we live in.
Balloon boy, anybody ever throw that at you these days?
Yeah, a lot.
But you're laughing about it.
Yeah. It's just
wait, it happens a lot?
Yeah.
What's your reaction to it?
I'm just like, ah.
Do you ever go to sleep and picture a strange man with a receding hairline, a unibrow and a strange expression? Me neither. Nobody does, I hope. Maybe you do, but the creators of thisman.org managed to go viral back in 2009 by claiming that thousands of people had seen this man in their dreams. The story goes that a psychiatrist in New York in 2006 had drawn the face of a man that had been appearing in his patient's dreams. He left the drawing on his desk and it was recognized by another one of his patients who says that they see this man in their dreams as well. So obviously he's a bit intrigued and he goes and talks to some of his other psychiatrist mates and they're like, "Bloody hell, I've got a patient who's seen him too. Who the bloody hell is this man?" But this man didn't exist. It was a website created by an Italian viral marketing specialist named Andrea Natella. See, Andrea ran an advertising agency called Guerrilla Marketing, and he was the mastermind behind other hoaxes, such as a fake UFO landing in a small town in Italy that was designed to promote tourism. He eventually admitted that this man was a marketing campaign, but they've never really announced what it was for. However, Brian Bettino, the writer and director of literally the most horrifying film ever, The Strangers, was rumoured to be making a film named This Man, and Ghost House Pictures eventually ended up buying the website thisman.org in 2010. But Hollywood is a fickle industry, and for every film that makes it to the screen, hundreds end up never going anywhere, and sadly, this man appears to be one of them. I am so happy that I have an excuse to talk about this next one because it is truly one of my favourites. We're talking about Bat Boy and the Weekly World News.
Weekly World News is one extraordinary story after another. Wow! Weekly World News this week. Mom and daughter died together.
3 hours later, they came back to life.
For those of you that aren't familiar, let's do a bit of history first. The Weekly World News is a tabloid that was launched in 1979 by Generoso Pope Jr., who prior to the Weekly World News had worked for the CIA and had gone on to create the National Enquirer. At the CIA, he worked in psychological operations, which is interesting because the National Enquirer have been responsible for pushing all manner of stories about little green men from out of space and UFOs abducting people, which almost provides a convenient cover for intelligence agencies and the military-industrial complex that can hide behind these wild and oftentimes unbelievable stories. But maybe that's for another video. When the Weekly World News first started, they were essentially finding weird stories in other newspapers, clipping them and republishing them. But as time went on, they started to get more creative with their storytelling. And essentially everything that they've printed is, in the words of my mother, a load of old cobblers. Load of old cobblers is a little bit of like Cockney rhyming slang. The Americans might not get it. Bat Boy appeared on June 23rd, 1992 and was the creation of Dick Culper, who drew Bat Boy, and the folk musician Bob Lind, who wrote up the story. It is wild to me that Bob Lind, the man who sang Elusive Butterfly, is responsible for the partial creation of Bat Boy.
Don't be concerned, it will not harm you.
According to Culper, he was asked to create a space alien baby, and that's how Bat Boy was born. I think the editor at the time was a man named Eddie Klontz, and it was his brother Derek that had come up with the story, that Bat Boy had been found in a cave in West Virginia. But that was just the beginning.
In a startling follow-up to an earlier Weekly World News cover story, Bat Boy has escaped from this research and observation center near the campus of a West Virginia college.
People were so fascinated with the story of Bat Boy that it became a kind of saga. Every once in a while he would pop up and he'd have like police chases, altercations with the FBI, that kind of thing.
Do you have any late information on the whereabouts of Bat Boy?
Yes, sir. There have been many calls to the Highway Patrol and other local authorities regarding the whereabouts of Bat Boy, but none of these leads have led to Bat Boy's capture.
Bat Boy was so popular with audiences that he even had his own off-Broadway musical. He obviously never existed, but the Weekly World News didn't run a fictional stories disclaimer until 2004, so maybe a few people ended up believing it, but I kind of doubt it. Although, as we know, if you've been following some of the last few videos that I've done, there are those that quote Weekly World News articles as facts, so you never know.
Hey Mom, I find it interesting that you refer to the Weekly World News as the paper. The paper contains facts.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more.
The city of Douglas in Wyoming is home to the mythical jackalope, a creation of a man named Douglas Herrick. Douglas, who lives in Douglas. I don't know about you, but I would have moved if I was him.
Now, Wyoming is where a jackalope you can see, and to hunt them, Douglas is the place to be.
It's called the jackalope capital of the world because many years ago, the Indians and the trappers that were around this country were the first ones to spot them.
Local literature claims sightings of jackalopes were frequent among intoxicated cowboys and UFO groupies, which may explain the frequent sightings in this part of Wyoming.
The jackalope is a jackrabbit with antlers. That's the simplest way I can explain it, and it doesn't exist. According to Douglas's brother Ralph, he and his brother came back from hunting, threw a dead jackrabbit on the floor, and it slid towards some deer horns. Both of them looked at it and thought, bloody hell, that's a rabbit with antlers. Let's put it on a mount. And then after that, they probably thought, let's make some mad money. So they made a bunch of them and they sold them. I'm not surprised that people bought them because they do look kind of cool, like they look a little bit interesting. They're a staple at dive bars across the USA, probably because they do look cool. And on a book note, they're referenced heavily in one of my favourite books of all time, which is Sarah by J.T. Leroy. Highly recommend. Most people know P.T. Barnum from the Greatest Showman film, which completely brushed over the fact that he built his fortune and fame off of the back of an enslaved black woman named Joyce Heth. And I think that's important to mention when talking about people like P.T. Barnum, a man who bought Joyce and exhibited her in her old age, claiming that she was 161 years old and that she was the nurse of George Washington. Even in death, Joyce Heth wasn't allowed any dignity because P.T. Barnum made her autopsy public and people paid to watch. There is so much that I could say about this absolutely vile man, but let's talk about the Fiji mermaid, which is one of his most infamous hoaxes. People first heard of the Fiji mermaid via a man called Dr. J. Griffin, who claimed to be part of the British Lyceum of Natural History. He'd been sending the press letters throughout 1842, letting them know that he'd be arriving in New York with a mermaid that he had found in the Fiji Islands. Thing is though, Dr. Griffin didn't actually exist, and he was actually a man named Levi Lyman who'd been working in cahoots with P.T. Barnum. The letters were a marketing tactic basically. They were designed to build hype over this so-called mermaid, which was later housed at P.T. Barnum's museum. P.T. Barnum actually got involved in the promotion of the mermaid, sending out pamphlets with images of beautiful looking mermaids on it, but the reality of the Fiji mermaid was a terrifyingly shriveled creature, proper grim. P.T. Barnum had actually acquired the mermaid from a man named Moses Kimball, who was another hoaxer. Just fucking hoaxers everywhere. And he had gotten it from a Japanese fisherman. It's a chimp sewn onto a fish. It's kind of gruesome, but in a way it's kind of endearing. And a similar type creature can be found at Marsh's Free Museum in Long Beach, Washington. He's called Jake the Alligator Man, and apparently he's half man, half alligator. And I visited him myself back in 2015, and I must say it was a truly spiritual experience.
There's a ghost in my house.
Here's where it's going to get controversial, because we are diving into the world of ghost stories. And I just want to be clear at the front, I don't believe in ghosts. We've established that I am very much a skeptic, but I do also find these stories absolutely fascinating. I'd say I'm like an agnostic when it comes to this kind of thing. Like, there are plenty of things that I can't explain, but I gravitate towards the more rational answer. And I love listening to Art Bell's Ghost to Ghost as much as the next person. But there are also a ton of people that will swear blindly that stories like the Enfield poltergeist aren't hoaxes and are very much real. But I think looking at the evidence is important, so let's get into it. The story begins in 1977 in Enfield, which is a borough in North London. Peggy Hodgson is a single mother with 4 children living at 284 Green Street. She has 2 sons, Johnny and Billy, and 2 daughters, Margaret and Janet. Peggy had put her kids to sleep when she heard screaming coming from their bedroom. And obviously thinking it was just like kids messing around, she decided to go and tell them to be quiet. But when she got into the room, she found both Margaret and her brother terrified, and they told her that a chest of drawers was moving towards their bedroom door.
Me and my brother, we were settling down to bed one evening and we could hear this shuffling noise, and Mum coming because she could hear us shouting and screaming, and we said that the chest of drawers was moving.
Peggy obviously thought that it was kids being kids and didn't really believe them at first, but then she saw it with her own 2 eyes and was obviously terrified.
But she saw it move for herself, and then at one point she couldn't push it back, and then she got quite upset.
So Peggy goes and gets her neighbour Vic, and he came in, heard the noises coming from the bedroom, and was terrified himself, runs out the house. They end up calling the police, and PC Caroline Heaps claims that she saw a large armchair move across the floor.
She said at the time a large armchair moved unassisted 4 feet across the floor. This is the police. Eventually the officers left, telling you that the incidents were not a police matter and you couldn't find anyone breaking the law.
The Hodgsons stay in the house, and I know some people will be like, well, why didn't they move? But Peggy's a single mum with 4 children in the late 1970s. I'm going to assume that moving house wouldn't have been an easy or affordable task for them. According to the family, the haunting went on for 18 months, with all kinds of strange events happening, from levitation to furniture turning over to fires igniting, and Janet claims that a curtain wrapped itself around her neck. Peggy calls the Daily Mirror, who sent a photographer called Graham Morris to the house, and that photographer claimed that a piece of Lego hit him in the face. Graham's camera was also responsible for getting the infamous pictures of Janet levitating out of bed, and both of them claim that the camera was set up in the room to take continuous photographs. Now, I'm not sure whether that's 100% true. I wasn't there, so I'm comfortable in saying I don't know, but if you look at the photographs, they could easily be Janet jumping out of bed, which I will note she does categorically deny.
Well, I was in bed and it's like I felt cold hands and there was like a force that sort of pulled me out of bed. And sometimes I'd be pulled to my bedroom door, sometimes I'd be pulled up into the air.
How come the newspaper journalist was taking a picture of you whilst you were in your bed? Did you just fly it? He happened to be there at the time?
No, he didn't. He wasn't there at the time. No, it was the camera was on continuous drive.
I see. So it was recording all the time.
Yes.
That was. I see.
Yeah.
So the Daily Mirror are like, right, we're onto something here, and they end up calling in the Society of Cyclical Research, which is a society set up to study paranormal events. Maurice Gross was part of this society, and he was sent out to the house to investigate. Maurice had actually gotten involved in paranormal research after the death of his daughter, and he claimed to have experienced a lot of unexplainable events after her death. Now, it's not abnormal for people to have these kind of experiences when someone incredibly close to them dies. I know a lot of people who claim to have been visited by their dead relatives, and I'm not really in the business of debunking deeply personal experiences. All I will say is that the human brain is incredibly powerful. Maurice spends a while at the house with another member of the society, Guy Lyon Playfair, and both of them claim to experience the poltergeist. Janet is the one who experiences the most activity with the poltergeist, which begins to talk through her.
Well, perhaps Guy, perhaps you've got something to say to them.
Yeah. I'd like to know how you make this noise without bashing Janet's vocal cords to pieces. If I do it for half a minute, I get a sore throat.
Goose chases here.
The voice is allegedly a man named Bill Wilkins, who had actually died in the house years before. Now, I have to admit, the voice that came out of Janet is scary. Like, it's deep, haunting, and if I was in the room, I'd absolutely shit myself. Now, Janet herself admits to faking certain incidents around the house to see if Maurice and Guy would find out. And she says that all of the times that they faked something, they'd immediately be caught. However, many skeptics have claimed that the audio recordings are the girls faking voices. And some of the subject matter in the recordings is quite juvenile in nature. But again, Janet says she wasn't faking any of this. This is obviously the late 1970s, and the story is happening in the wake of movies like The Exorcist, and the voice that Janet gives is kind of similar. Now, I'm not saying that she's lying, but there's a lot in this story that points to it being a hoax. You've already got children admitting to fabricating certain events, albeit also claiming that they only fabricated around 2% of them. You've also got these two blokes investigating who already want to believe, like, they're in this house investigating impressionable children, and I think that should give us some pause. Like, you've essentially got an entire house full of people that want to believe in something, which is definitely going to cloud their ability to think rationally about what's happening. But again, I wasn't there.
It upsets me deep down to think that they can't give us an open mind, the ones that just put it down completely. But all I can say to them is I wish they can experience the same thing as what we went through. They certainly wouldn't say it was false or fake or it was child playing or anything of that kind.
You wasn't there, love. You don't know.
Do you know who was there? Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were obviously convinced that it was a spirit, demon, whatever. And that leads us nicely to their most famous case, the Amityville Horror. I am no fan of Ed and Lorraine Warren, but I know that they have legions of fans, a lot of them stemming from the Conjuring movie franchise. And I think there's a huge difference between the Ed and Lorraine that are depicted on screen and the Ed and Lorraine that actually existed in real life. They catapulted onto the paranormal investigation scene after two friends claimed that their doll was possessed by the spirit of a girl named Annabelle. Before that, they had founded the New England Society of Psychic Research. They they were Roman Catholics, and Lorraine's view was that those not religious were more susceptible to attacks from demons. I think before we dive into the Amityville horror, the history of Ed and Lorraine Warren is important to highlight. These two essentially had an entire career built off of religious fundamentalism and satanic panic, but somehow their legacy hasn't been tainted by this. They were heavily involved in the case of Arne Johnson, which was the premise for the last Conjuring movie that came out called The Devil Made Me Do It, where they essentially claimed that a demon was possessing an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel.
David was in the very beginning stages of demonic possession.
And that when an exorcism took place, the demon then went on to possess Arne.
Arne Johnson, who was a young man that was engaged to his sister, Debbie, would help every night to control the boy. But he made a fatal mistake. One night he said, and he screamed at these devils, "Take me on. Leave my little buddy alone."
Who then went on to murder his landlord, Alan Bono. At the trial, they basically asserted that the demon had done it and not Arne.
But I could understand the judge's feelings too. He didn't want to be known as the judge who allowed the devil made me do it case into his courtroom.
David's brother Carl claims that the entire possession story was a hoax created by Ed and Lorraine Warren, saying that they had told the family that the story would make them millionaires and help get Arne out of jail. There are also allegations that Ed Warren was in a relationship with a 15-year-old who lived in the house with him and Lorraine. I use quotation marks because a 15-year-old cannot be like in a relationship with an old ass man. But if you want to hear more about that, then Grayson's project has a great video on it. But basically, the allegations towards these two supposedly devout Catholics are pretty horrifying. And it's not like the Roman Catholic Church needs more people giving it a bad name.
Child abuse, yeah!
The Amityville story is arguably the one that secured Ed and Lorraine the bag. Back in 1974, a man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered 6 members of his family at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, which is in Long Island, New York. Much like Arne Johnson would later go on to do, Ronald claimed that he had been possessed by a spirit. It was a horrifying case, and Ronald DeFeo ended up dying in prison. Just over a year after the murders, the Lutz family moved into the house where they stayed for 28 days before leaving, saying that the house was haunted and that it was so bad that they had just abandoned the house and all of their earthly possessions inside. But what exactly happened? Well, it's your typical haunting mixed with some darker stuff. The Lutzes said that their personalities began to change and that they would get incredibly angry with their children, eventually beating them. There were also foul smells, swarms of flies, levitation, and an apparent pig-like creature that would appear to the children, who named her Jody.
You say a friend of yours lives here and you've been in the house. Is there any truth to all these stories that it's haunted and there are weird smells and slime and all those other things?
Nothing at all. It's all a bunch of lies.
Well, how do you feel about all these tourists coming by and the movie opening and all of this? What do you think of that?
Well, I live right down the road and it's a pain in the neck because you can't even get down the block.
Obviously, after fleeing the house, they went to the press, who lapped the story up. Again, this is the 1970s, and a story with eerily similar details to the film The Exorcist, so it's no wonder that the press were all over it. Ed and Lorraine showed up, and Lorraine said that she could feel a demonic presence. I'm thinking that she was maybe just picking up on Ed's vibe. And Ed said that he was attacked by a sinister force. Now, all of the usual suspects converge on the house, wanting to get a piece of the demonic pie.
That's why the investigation was held, and people from different psychic research groups that at least we could check their credentials were called in and asked to come in.
But journalists that were there claimed that nothing really out of the ordinary happened. And news anchor Marvin Scott said, "The only voices I heard were of my crew wanting to know when we were going to eat the sandwiches that we brought along." That feels very relatable. That feels like what I would do if I was in a haunted house. I'd be like, I don't care about these ghosts. Where's the sandwiches? The Lutzes passed a polygraph test, which many point to as definitive proof that they were telling the truth. But lie detectors are inadmissible in court, and they're often wrong, despite the outstanding track record of Maury Povich.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
The story gained even more attention when it was turned into the book The Amityville Horror by Jay Anson, which is fictional but based on a true story. But it's not a true story. It's most definitely a hoax, and it has been debunked over and over again. The Lutz family were alleged to have been in debt, and many claim that this story was a way to try and get out of their mortgage, or to get money from a book deal, which eventually they did get. The defence lawyer for Ronald DeFeo, William Weber, claims that he cooked up the story with the Lutzes over a few bottles of wine.
I had photographs of the crime scene, and based upon the photographs and other facts that I had related, we developed what ultimately turned out to be part of the Lutz's version of the possession aspect of the case.
Convenient for him, I guess, because he can use the demonic defence for his client and get some money out of the back end. The Lutzes ended up suing him for invasion of privacy, but then he countersued for fraud and breach of contract, and they both settled out of court. Later down the line, Ronald DeFeo said that William Weber had insisted that he claimed insanity because it would make for a more lucrative book and film deal. Now, in 2013, Daniel Lutz, who was just a child when his family moved into the house, claimed that his dad had been dabbling with the occult and had essentially summoned the demon. Look, it doesn't matter what I say about this or what other skeptics say about it. People are always going to believe if it fits in with their ideology. Like with all of this stuff, debunking makes no difference to the mind of a true believer who's just looking for someone to reinforce what they already feel is true. And believing in ghosts opens up the possibility of life after death. And who doesn't want to live forever? As for Ed and Lorraine, they claim that the demons they encountered at Amityville followed them home. Again, I think they just might be referring to Ed. Back in 2015, Elizabeth Holmes was on top of the world. She had been named by Forbes magazine as the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire because of the blood testing company that she had created, Theranos. Elizabeth had always wanted to make it rich, and her family have spoken about a child that was extremely competitive, especially when it came to Monopoly. Now, that's the kind of game that's going to give you a bit of insight into the psyche of the people playing. And personally, when I'm playing Monopoly, I can't wait for it to be over. But Elizabeth wanted to play until the very end, and allegedly, if she didn't win, then she'd storm off. First red flag. Elizabeth started her own business when she was in high school. She sold computer programs to Chinese universities. She studied chemical engineering at Stanford University, but she ended up dropping out to create what was then called real-time cures. The idea was to be able to run numerous blood tests with only a small sample. Think like if you've ever done a blood sugar test, like you just get a small prick on the finger and then it's over with. She was motivated by a fear of needles herself, but numerous professors told her that it was basically impossible to do this. But she ended up raising a ton of money from venture capitalists, and she began to style herself after Steve Jobs with the turtleneck jumper and all. She was one of those people that like never took holidays and made sure that everybody else knew about it. She wanted to work constantly, and because of that, like she wanted her staff to work constantly too. She'd get dinner catered to the office, she'd track when her employees arrived and left, that kind of stuff. Now, I used to work in marketing many years ago, and that's not uncommon behaviour. Like, I always say that if an office is catering dinner or all of these other like so-called incentives, it's usually because they want you to spend the best part of your life there and like never detach from your work. It's this really shitty hustle culture. It's like work like 23 hours a day, grind, anyone can make it, privilege doesn't matter, self-made billionaire. It's like Gary Vaynerchuk being like, do you know what is a privilege? Not having money.
You know what I think is a better advantage than fucking being born into something? Being born into nothing.
Like the most tone-deaf bullshit. But Elizabeth was incredibly privileged, and her father was the vice president of Enron. Second red flags. There's so many red flags in this girl's childhood. So Elizabeth is building this company, and they're getting a lot of acclaim because they are bringing in a ton of investors and loads of money. She ends up speaking on panels with people like Bill Clinton, another red flag, and various tech bros that I don't really care about. Theranos also had a partnership with Walgreens to launch in-store blood sample collection centres, and she also partnered up with a bunch of private healthcare providers. But things started to go sour, as they often do, and in August 2015 the FDA started to investigate Theranos, basically saying that the tests they were launching had major inaccuracies. There was an investigation that came out in the Wall Street Journal in October 2015 that blew the lid off the entire thing.
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world. And I have to say, I personally was shocked to see that the journal would publish something like this.
Theranos were claiming that their finger prick test would be able to analyse everything from cholesterol to cancer, and they had created a blood testing machine that they named Edison to do it. But Edison was more useless than a glass hammer, so they actually ended up running the blood test through traditional blood testing labs, and essentially it didn't work. In 2018, Elizabeth Holmes was charged with 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. But she went on to live her best life and get married to another child of privilege that she had met at Burning Man. I wouldn't go to Burning Man if you paid me, because it is full of people like this. It's like rich people larping it up in the desert, and I am not about that life. It's the most insufferable people in the world go to Burning Man. I'm sorry, I apologise if you go to Burning Man, but most of them are insufferable. Anyway, her trial is currently ongoing and she is facing up to 20 years in prison. And people who worked closely with her say that she feels wronged, like Salem witch trial levels of wrong. And I don't really have the words for that, so let's just end it by saying gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Back in 2014, Alistair Muffet, the managing director of a company called Scotland's DNA, claimed that because of climate change, ginger or red hair was going to become extinct. He said, "We think red hair in Scotland, Ireland and the north of England is an adaptation to the climate. We do not get enough sun and have to get all the vitamin D we can." But he was making the whole thing up. His company deals in genetic ancestry packages, where for a mere £25 extra, you can find out whether you have the redhead gene. He had a bit of a long and sordid history of deceiving the media when it comes to stories about genetics, because obviously if he can get a little bit of airtime and his name in the paper, then his company Scotland's DNA gets mentioned too, and that could potentially lead to new business. So no, gingers are not going extinct, and Alistair Muffet wasn't a doctor, but The Guardian did refer to him as such, later printing a retraction in which they said they were a little hasty in awarding him a doctorate. This one is such a stupid story, and it stems from a YouTube video that claims that a white onion soaked in Gatorade can produce enough electric to charge an iPod. The people that made the video claimed that the electrolytes in Gatorade get stored in the cells of an onion, but I feel like the cost of buying an onion and then like a bottle of Gatorade would be more expensive than just like using a plug. But I guess it's a fun science experiment that's total bollocks. It doesn't work. Let's move on. This next one has to be one of the most American stories to exist. On March 22nd, 2005, a woman named Anna Ayala went to Wendy's in search of a good meal. That was her first mistake. She ordered the chili, and when she went to eat it, she found a severed human finger floating around alongside the chunks of meat. Obviously, she's traumatized and she decides to sue and alert the media. Who wouldn't?
She found a finger in her bowl of chili at a Wendy's in San Jose, California. We turn now to Anna Ayala and her attorney, Jeffrey Janoff.
Well, as I was eating my chili, and I usually crack all my crackers and just put them in there, mix it all around, and started eating the way usually people eat. And suddenly I chew something that's kind of hard, crunchy.
The Santa Clara Medical Examiner's Office investigated the finger, and they said that it didn't come from any employee at Wendy's. Because you'd think that if somebody literally lost a finger, that there would be a record of it, or at least somebody working there would be like, oh my god, yeah, it was Dave, like his bloody finger got chopped off the other day, like he lost his whole ass finger. It was widely reported in the media, and Wendy's lost an estimated $21 million of business. Because who wants to eat somewhere where there's the possibility of body parts floating around in your food? I feel like I'm going to get the vegans coming for me for that comment. But here's the thing. Anna planted the finger there herself. Her husband Jamie had gotten it from a co-worker who had lost it at work, which really tells you something about the state of America and healthcare in general. Like, instead of keeping this poor guy's finger, taking him to a doctor and like reattaching it, they're like, give me that finger, I'm gonna scam Wendy's. And look, I'm not defending them, but I do respect this hustle more than Elizabeth Holmes. This is my kind of rise and grind culture. Anna ended up getting sentenced to 9 years in prison, which is a lot, and it does show up the way different classes are treated. You've got Anna, who put a finger in a bowl of chili, getting sentenced to 9 years, and then you've got Elizabeth Holmes, who created billions of wealth out of a scam and ripped off multiple people. She goes to Burning Man, gets married as a kid. Just like madness. Wendy's Chili wasn't Anna's only lawsuit. She's got a long history of scams, and she recently got 2 years in jail for trying to cover for her son who shot himself in the leg. I'm not trying to defend her, like obviously what she did was wrong. I'm just saying, like, comparatively, Elizabeth Holmes is up for 20 years max. This woman, Anna, puts her finger in a bowl of chili. She got sentenced to 9 years. I don't think she served the whole 9 years, but she still got like, so it's like, how does Elizabeth Holmes, who does all that, like literally defrauding billions, get only double the sentence? Make that make sense to me. Anyway, let's move on. This is a hoax that began on 4chan, where people had photoshopped a tweet from Entertainment Tonight saying that Justin Bieber had been sadly diagnosed with cancer and that his fans were shaving their heads in solidarity. Hashtag bald for Bieber. They also photoshopped tweets from Justin himself saying, I love my awesome fans for shaving their heads and helping me get through this. Then a user named Bald for Bieber uploaded an out of context clip of people getting their heads shaved live on a radio station, saying that these people were going bald for Bieber, but they weren't. It was for a 2010 concert ticket giveaway. In reality, nobody fell for this hoax. It just started trending on Twitter and people were talking about it, but no fans actually shaved their heads. Every now and again on Facebook, you might see a viral post from somebody claiming that a billionaire is going to be giving away a large part of their fortune if you just do this one thing. There's a hilarious post of Bill Gates holding up a bit of paper saying, hey Facebook, if you smash that mother effing share button, I'll give you $5,000. I always deliver. I mean, I bought you Windows XP, right? Almost 400,000 people shared that. Like, they looked at it and they went, why not? Got nothing to lose. But I do have to say, this is probably the most harmless thing that has been shared about Bill Gates on Facebook. Let's move on. Despite having wings, penguins can't actually fly. Their wings are for swimming and they can go pretty damn fast underwater. But on April Fool's Day 2008, the BBC released a trailer for a film called Miracles of Evolution. In the trailer, it claims that certain penguins have developed the ability to fly, travelling thousands of miles to the rainforests of South America. The trailer was narrated by Terry Jones from Monty Python, directed by Professor Alid Loyas, and the Daily Mirror published the news about flying penguins on their front page. But they were basically all working in cahoots with each other. It was an elaborate April Fool's Day hoax, and Professor Alid Loyas was an anagram of April Fools. And last but certainly not least, on the second tier of the hoax iceberg is Birdman, also known as Jarno Smeets, who was a mechanical engineer from the Netherlands who was obsessed with the idea of human flight. Jarno wanted to learn how to fly and created a website called humanbirdwings.net. On YouTube, he can be seen flapping these massive wings and achieving what we all dream of, human flight. He detailed his life on YouTube and on his blog, talking about his dreams of flight and how he was inspired by his grandpa and this entire life story, basically. The only thing is, Jarno Smeets doesn't actually exist, and he was actually a man named Floris Cake, who was a digital artist who created Jarno as an art project, which was basically about the media and online storytelling. So sadly, penguins can't fly, and neither can we. So that's tier 2 of the Hoax Iceberg done. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of the madness. Let me know what your favourite hoax is. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!